The rain fell soft and steady against the window glass, a quiet rhythm that matched the mood inside the small cafe, steam rising from 2 cups of tea untouched between them. He watched her fingers trace the rim of her cup round and round, a nervous habit he had come to know over 2 years of shared mornings and late-night talks. "You don't need to fix things for me," she said, her voice low but clear. "I am grown, I can handle my own life." He leaned forward, elbows on the wooden table, his hands open, palms up as if offering something she could not see. "I am not trying to fix you," he said. "I am trying to stand beside you. There is a difference." She shook her head, a strand of dark hair falling across her forehead. She did not brush it away. Her eyes stayed fixed on her tea as if the answers were swirling in the amber liquid. "When the big project at my office fell through, you spent 3 nights researching jobs for me in 3 different cities. You made spreadsheets," she said. "When my mother called sick, you had already looked up flights before I even hung up the phone. You move so fast to solve things, you don't leave space for me to breathe." "That is what love does," he replied, his voice gentle but firm. "It moves toward the people it cares about." "No," she said, finally looking up, her gaze steady now. "That is what control does. Love trusts, love waits, love believes the other person can find their own way. I need to find my own way without someone already 3 steps ahead, clearing every stone from the path." The words landed between them heavy and final. He felt them settle in his chest, a weight that made it hard to draw air. He could have argued, he could have listed all the times he had stepped back, all the decisions he had let her make alone. He could have reminded her how he had supported her promotion, how he had celebrated when she bought her first apartment, how he had never once asked her to change her dreams for his. But something in her expression stopped him. It was not anger, it was not cruelty, it was a quiet certainty, a resolve that had been building for weeks, maybe months. He saw it now, the distance that had grown between their conversations, the way she had started saying I instead of we, the way she pulled her hand back when he reached for it in public. "You are asking me to walk away," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I am asking you to let me grow," she replied. The rain outside picked up, tapping harder against the glass like tiny fists wanting in. He thought about the first time he had seen her laughing with her head thrown back in a crowded bookstore over a year ago. Now she had been holding a novel with a broken spine, and he had been drawn to the sound before he even saw her face. He thought about the way she hummed when she cooked, the way she always saved the last bite of dessert for him, the way she had held his hand in the hospital when his father had surgery, never saying much, just being there, solid and sure. He had built a life around those small moments, around the certainty that she would be there tomorrow and the day after that. And now she was telling him not to count on it. He stood slowly, the wooden chair scraping against the floor, a sound that made several people glance over. He did not care. He pulled on his coat, the damp wool heavy on his shoulders. He looked at her one last time, memorizing the curve of her cheek, the way her lips pressed together when she was trying not to cry. "If this is what you need," he said, his voice even though his hands trembled. He hoped she could not see. He hoped she would remember him as strong even now, especially now. "Then I hope you find it." He turned and walked toward the door, each step feeling like a mile. The bell above the entrance chimed, a cheerful sound that mocked the heaviness in his chest. He stepped into the rain and did not look back. He walked down the street, water soaking through his shoes, his coat, his hair. He walked until his legs ached and the cafe was far behind him, until the city lights blurred through the rain and his tears. That night in his apartment he sat on the edge of the bed staring at his phone, the screen dark. He had typed her name 3 times, started messages, deleted them. What would he say? Please stay. That would sound desperate. I understand. That would sound like a lie. I will wait. That would sound like pressure. He put the phone face down on the nightstand and lay back on the bed, the ceiling above him familiar and suddenly foreign. He had painted it with her just 6 months ago, laughing as they dripped white paint on the floor, arguing over whether 2 coats were enough. They had ordered pizza and eaten it on the floor, surrounded by drop cloths, their hands sticky with cheese and tomato sauce. Now the room was silent. The days that followed moved in slow motion. He went to work, he answered emails, he met friends for drinks, he smiled when expected, he laughed at jokes, he even made some of his own, but everything felt like acting, like he was playing the part of a man who had not just had his heart carefully placed on a table and politely asked to leave it there. He cleaned his apartment top to bottom, scrubbed the kitchen floors, organized his bookshelf by color instead of author, washed every dish, even the ones already clean. His hands needed work, his mind needed distraction. One evening he found himself standing in the grocery store aisle staring at two brands of tea, the one she liked, the one he liked. He reached for hers out of habit, then stopped, his hand hovering midair. He put it back and chose his own brand instead, a small surrender, a tiny death. Weeks passed, the rain gave way to sun, then clouds, then rain again. The city moved on as cities do. People fell in love, broke up, got jobs, lost jobs, had babies, celebrated birthdays. Life continued its relentless forward motion. He started running before sunrise when the streets were empty and the air still cool. He ran until his lungs burned and his legs shook, until the only thing in his head was the rhythm of his feet against pavement. Left, right, a simple steady beat that drowned out the noise, the what ifs, the if onlys. He learned to cook new recipes, meals for one. He set one plate at the table, never two. He read books she would have loved and felt a pang each time he came across a passage he wished he could share. He stopped himself from taking pictures of interesting things on his walks, the street musician with the golden voice, the cat sleeping in a sunbeam, the perfect slice of sunset over the river. There was no one to send them to anymore. He told himself this was growth too, not the kind she was seeking, but his own, learning to carry weight alone, learning to sit with silence, learning that some wounds do not bleed but ache deep where no one can see. Sometimes in dreams she would appear whole and warm, reaching for his hand, and he would wake with a start, the sheets tangled around his legs, the room dark and empty. He did not hate her for leaving, he did not even blame her, not really. He understood the desire to prove oneself, to stand alone under one's own sky without anyone holding up the edges. But understanding did not stop the missing. Understanding did not fill the space at the table. Understanding did not warm the other side of the bed. He had loved her not because she needed him, but because he chose her each day, because her mind fascinated him, because her laugh felt like home, because when he looked at her he saw a future worth building. And she had looked at him and seen a cage. Or so she thought. He kept walking, kept breathing, kept living, one foot in front of the other, the way people do after loss, not because the pain disappears but because life demands it. He did not know then that a year would change them both, that distance would teach her what closeness had not, that silence would show him what words could not. He did not know that fate had not finished with them yet. He only knew the rain, the empty chair, the quiet apartment, and the slow hard work of learning to live in a world where she was no longer his tomorrow. He walked away because she asked him to. And in that act of letting go he discovered a different kind of strength, not the strength of holding on but the strength of releasing what you love, because love sometimes means honoring another person's need to find themselves even when it means losing them. The rain kept falling, washing the streets clean, washing the windows clear, washing away footprints until no trace remained of who had passed through. He kept walking. One step, then another. Into a future he had not planned. Into a life he had not chosen, but his own nonetheless. First morning after he walked away he woke at 6:30 just like always. His body did not know his life had changed. His hand reached across the bed for warmth but found only cold sheets. He pulled it back slowly and lay staring at the ceiling, the same ceiling they had painted together just months before, white paint on their arms, their laughter mixing with the radio music. Now the room was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator downstairs. He got up, made coffee for one. The ritual felt foreign. He used to grind extra beans for her. She liked it strong with a splash of oat milk. Now he measured exactly 1 scoop, poured exactly 1 cup. The precision felt like punishment. At work his desk sat in the same spot, his computer booted the same way, his colleagues greeted him with the same morning nods, but everything had shifted like a room where someone has moved all the furniture 6 inches in the night. Nothing was technically wrong but nothing felt right either. He typed emails, attended meetings, sketched designs for buildings that would stand long after this ache faded. He functioned, he performed, he survived. But in the quiet moments between tasks his mind drifted to her. Did she sleep well? Did she remember to eat lunch? Did she wear the blue scarf he bought her last winter, the one she said made her feel like a character in an old movie? He caught himself reaching for his phone to text her a photo of the sunrise over the river. He stopped, his thumb hovering over the screen. He put the phone face down on his desk and took a deep breath. Evenings were the hardest. The apartment stretched around him empty and echoing. He tried filling the silence with noise, television, podcasts, music, but the noise only highlighted the absence. He started cooking elaborate meals for one, chopping vegetables with fierce concentration, searing steaks that filled the kitchen with rich smells, setting the table with care, then eating alone. The food tasted like nothing. One night 3 weeks after she left, he found himself standing in the grocery store frozen foods aisle, staring at a box of her favorite frozen dinners, the kind she ate on late work nights. He picked it up, held it, turned it over in his hands, then placed it gently back on the shelf. He walked away without buying anything, not even his own groceries. That day he went home and ate crackers and cheese at the kitchen counter, watching dusk settle over the city. His friends tried to help. They invited him out for drinks, dinners, movies. He went, sometimes forcing smiles, laughing at jokes that did not reach his eyes. They asked how he was doing. He said, "Fine, fine, thanks, how are you?" And the conversation moved on. No one knew what to say about the empty space beside him. No one knew how to fix a heart that was not broken exactly, just rearranged into a shape that no longer fit his body. He started running before dawn, when the streets belonged to delivery trucks and night shift workers and insomniacs like him. He ran until his lungs burned and his legs trembled, until the only thought in his head was the next step, the next breath. The steady rhythm of movement, his shoes hitting pavement, became a mantra. She chose this, she chose this, she chose this, not to blame her but to remind himself this was her decision, her need, her path. He had honored it. He had walked away when she asked him to. That had to be enough. Months passed, seasons shifted, the rain gave way to summer heat, then the crisp air of fall. He marked time not by calendars but by small surrenders. The day he finally threw away the toothbrush she left behind, the day he stopped setting 2 mugs on the counter, the day he donated the oversized sweater she always stole from his closet. The wool still held a faint trace of her perfume. He held it to his face one last time before placing it in the donation bag. He learned to live in the quiet. He read books she would have loved and felt the ghost of conversations they might have had. He watched movies she wanted to see and imagined her reactions at certain scenes. He walked through parks they had visited and did not flinch at the memories. Instead, he let them wash over him like weather passing through, acknowledging their presence without drowning in them. One evening in his sister's kitchen, months after the breakup, he showed up unannounced at midnight, hair wet from rain, eyes hollow with exhaustion. She made tea without asking, sat beside him on the couch, waited. "I let her go because she asked me to," he said, staring into his mug, steam warming his face. "What kind of man does that?" "The kind who loves her enough to respect her choice even when it destroys him," his sister replied simply. He looked at her, then really looked, and saw his own pain reflected in her eyes. She had loved and lost too. She understood the particular agony of releasing someone, not because you stopped caring but because you cared too much to hold them back. That conversation became a turning point, not a sudden healing but a shift in perspective. He began to see his solitude not as punishment but as space, a room he could furnish with his own choices, his own rhythms, his own becoming. He started renovating a small brownstone in Brooklyn, weekends spent sanding floors, installing cabinets, painting walls. His hands grew rough, his muscles ached, but the work was honest, tangible. He could see progress each day, unlike the invisible work of mending a heart. He discovered he liked mornings alone with coffee and sunlight. He liked choosing dinner without consulting anyone. He liked the freedom of a schedule built only around his own needs. These were not replacements for what he had lost, but discoveries about who he was beneath the layers of partnership. 9 months after walking away, he stood on the roof of the brownstone watching the sunset paint the city gold and rose. He felt something unexpected, not happiness exactly, but peace, a quiet acceptance that life had rerouted him and he had survived the journey. He thought of her sometimes, still a flicker in his chest when a song came on the radio or he passed their cafe, but the sharp edge had dulled to a soft hum, a memory rather than a wound. He had become exactly what she wanted, someone who could stand alone without needing another person to feel complete. The irony settled in his bones, not bitter but bittersweet. He had proven his strength by letting go, not by holding tight. One afternoon he found an old photo tucked in a book, she laughing, head thrown back, eyes crinkled at the corners, pure joy captured in a single moment. He did not feel pain looking at it, he felt gratitude for the time they had shared, for the love that was real even if it was not forever. He placed the photo in a drawer, not to hide it but to honor it as a chapter closed, not erased. He did not know then that her journey toward independence would lead her somewhere unexpected, that standing alone in certain storms feels very different from standing alone on calm days. He did not know that fate had not finished weaving their threads together. He only knew this: he had walked away when asked, he had honored her need even when it cost him everything, he had loved her enough to release her, and in that release he had found a different kind of love, the love of self, the love of quiet mornings, the love of building a life that could stand on its own 2 feet. The city hummed below him, lights blinking on. As dusk deepened he took a deep breath, the air cool and clean in his lungs. He was alone, but he was not lonely, not anymore. He had learned the difference. And somewhere across the city she was learning her own lessons about strength and solitude, and the quiet truth that being grown does not mean standing alone, it means knowing when to reach for a hand and when to offer one. But that was her story, not his, not yet. For now he stood on the roof watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky, each light distant but steady, burning on its own, yet part of something vast and beautiful together. He turned and went inside to his quiet apartment, his own space, his own life. And for the first time in a long time that was enough. A truth she never spoke that day in the cafe sat heavy in her chest like a stone. She had already signed papers for a position in another city, a junior partnership at a firm known for bold designs and international projects. They offered her the role Tuesday morning. By Wednesday she had accepted. By Thursday she sat across from him stirring tea that had gone cold. She could have told him the truth: I got a job far away and I am taking it. But something stopped her. She saw how his eyes lit up when he talked about their future, the apartment they would buy, the trips they would take, the slow quiet life they were building together. She could not bear to be the reason that future dissolved. She could not watch his face fall when she said, I am leaving you for a career. So she wrapped her choice in words that sounded noble: I need to be grown, I need to stand on my own, I need space to breathe. She made it about strength, not distance, about growth, not goodbye. She thought if he believed she was choosing herself, not rejecting him, he might hate her less, he might remember her with respect, not resentment. She was wrong. The new city greeted her with gray skies and wind that cut through coats no matter how thick. She rented an apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a great lake. The view was stunning, but the space felt hollow. No shared jokes, no familiar smells, no warmth waiting when she came home after long days at the office. Her new colleagues were sharp, ambitious, always moving. She admired them but could not connect. She ate lunch alone at her desk, scrolling through photos on her phone, not of him but of moments they had shared, sunsets from their balcony, coffee shops where they spent rainy afternoons, the way he laughed when he told a story, his hands moving with the words. She missed his hands. Work consumed her. She designed bridges and towers. Her name appeared on important documents. Senior partners praised her precision, her vision. She climbed the ladder exactly as she had planned, but each rung felt colder than the last. Success tasted like metal, not sweetness. Nights were the hardest. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling the same way he did, though she did not know it yet. The silence pressed against her ears, a physical weight. She tried filling it with music, podcasts, the hum of the television, but noise could not replace presence. She thought of calling him many times, her finger hovering over his name in her contacts. She imagined his voice, warm and familiar, asking how her day was, what she ate for dinner, if she was warm enough. She deleted the draft messages before sending them. Pride is a quiet jailer. It does not lock doors, it simply convinces you the door was never meant to open again. 8 months into her new life she woke one morning feeling strange, lightheaded, nauseous. She told herself it was stress, too many late nights, not enough sleep. But when the feeling returned the next morning and the next, she bought a test from a corner store. Her hands shook as she carried it home. The result showed 2 pink lines, clear and undeniable. She sat on the edge of her bed staring at the small plastic stick, the world narrowing to those 2 lines. Time stretched, then compressed. She thought of hospitals and doctors and midnight worries. She thought of tiny fingers and first steps and bedtime stories. She thought of doing it all alone. The fear that gripped her was not about money or logistics, those she could handle. She had proven that she could manage spreadsheets, budgets, deadlines, complex engineering problems. The fear was about silence. Who would she call at 2 in the morning when anxiety wrapped around her chest like a vice? Who would hold her hand during an ultrasound? Who would share the wonder of feeling a first kick? Who would look at their child and see pieces of both of them reflected back? She had spent months proving she did not need anyone to survive, but survival was not the same as living. She had confused independence with isolation. Standing on your own 2 feet feels powerful until a storm comes and you realize even the strongest trees bend toward each other in high winds. She thought of him not with regret but with a dawning clarity. Love is not a cage, it is a shelter you build together. You do not lose yourself inside it, you become more yourself because someone sees you clearly and chooses to stay. She had mistaken his care for control, his presence for pressure, his love for limitation. That evening she dug out an old sketchbook from a box in the closet. Dust floated in the air as she opened it. Blank pages stared back. She had not drawn for pleasure in months, only technical plans, precise measurements, no soul. She picked up a pencil and began to draw without thinking. Her hand moved on its own. The lines formed a window seat, cushions piled high, a view of city rooftops, rain streaking the glass, 2 mugs steaming on a small table. This was their apartment, their favorite spot on rainy Sundays. He reading architecture magazines, she sketching designs. They did not always talk, sometimes silence was enough because they were sharing it. She drew that window seat again the next day and the next. It became a ritual, each version slightly different but always the same essence: warmth, safety, togetherness. She filled margins of engineering drafts with these small drawings. Her co-workers noticed but said nothing. They saw the longing in the lines even if they did not know its source. One night she stood by her own window watching rain trace paths down the glass. Just like that day in the cafe, she placed a hand on her stomach, still flat but holding a secret growing quietly beneath her skin. She whispered words she had been too proud to say aloud: I was wrong. Being grown is not about doing everything alone, it is about knowing when to let someone stand beside you. It is about understanding that strength comes not from isolation but from connection, that we are built for partnership, not just survival. She did not call him that night or the next. Pride still held its ground, but something had shifted inside her. The walls she built around her heart developed cracks, not from force but from truth. She saw now that walking away had not made her stronger, it had only made her lonelier. She started preparing for the baby alone, attending appointments alone, buying tiny clothes alone, but each task felt incomplete, like a song missing its harmony. She imagined his face when he held their child for the first time, the wonder in his eyes, the gentle way his large hands would cradle something so small. She wondered if he ever thought of her, if he had moved on, if he had found someone who did not push him away when he tried to love her. She hoped he had not. Not because she wanted him back exactly, but because she finally understood what she had thrown away: not a safety net but a sanctuary, not a cage but a home. The lake outside her window darkened as evening fell. She placed both hands on her stomach, now a soft curve barely visible beneath her sweater. She made a promise, not to him, not yet, but to herself: when the time is right I will find my way back. I will tell him the truth, not the story I told in the cafe but the real reason I left, and I will ask if there is still room for me in his world. She did not know then that fate was already weaving their paths back together, that a historic theater needing restoration would bring their firms into the same room, that she would walk into a meeting and see him standing by the window just as she remembered. She only knew this: the journey toward independence had taught her its limits, that standing alone on a sunny day feels like freedom, but standing alone in a storm feels like abandonment, that being grown means knowing the difference. And she was finally grown enough to admit she did not want to stand alone anymore. She wanted to stand beside someone. She wanted to stand beside him. But first she had to survive the coming months, the doctor visits, the growing belly, the nights of worry and wonder. She had to become the mother her child deserved, and perhaps in doing so she would also become the woman worthy of a second chance. The rain continued outside, steady and soft, washing the city clean, preparing the ground for something new to grow. She turned from the window and began to draw again, this time not their old window seat but a new one, larger, with space for 3 mugs on the sill. Hope is a quiet thing. It does not announce itself with fanfare. It simply appears one day in the margins of a sketchbook, in the curve of a hand on a stomach, in the decision to imagine a future that includes someone you once walked away from. She was not there yet, not fully, but she was closer than she had been the day she told him she was grown and asked him to leave. She was learning that the most grown thing a person can do is admit when they were wrong. and she was almost ready to say the words aloud. The morning of the meeting dawned gray and uncertain, much like the day he had walked away from her a year before. He dressed carefully, choosing a shirt she had once said brought out the warmth in his eyes. He did not realize he had remembered this until his hand reached for it hanging in the back of his closet. He paused, then pulled it on, not for her but because today felt important in a way he could not name. His firm had won the contract to restore a historic theater on a busy downtown street, a beautiful old building with crumbling plaster and water-stained ceilings but magnificent bones, tall arched windows, intricate moldings, a stage that had held performers for nearly a century. He had studied the blueprints for weeks, learning every crack, every weakness, every possibility for renewal. He loved old buildings. They held memories in their walls. They asked only for patience and respect to reveal their beauty again. He arrived early, wanting to walk through the space alone before the engineers arrived. He pushed open the heavy wooden door and stepped inside. Dust motes danced in the slanted morning light. The air smelled of old wood and rain and time. The stage waited, silent and expectant. He ran his hand along a carved railing, imagining the hands that had touched it before him, the stories this building could tell if walls could speak. The conference room upstairs had been set up with a long table, blueprints spread across its surface, coffee carafe steaming in the corner. He took a seat near the window, arranging his notes just so, a habit from years of important meetings. His heart beat a steady rhythm. Nothing to be nervous about. This was work, just work. Then the door opened. He looked up without thinking, his eyes meeting hers across the room, and the world stopped breathing. She stood there frozen, one hand still on the doorknob, her body angled as if ready to retreat. Her hair was shorter, framing her face in a way that made her look both younger and older, her eyes wide with the same shock he felt. She wore a simple dress, her hand resting unconsciously on her stomach, a small curve visible beneath the fabric, a curve that had not been there a year ago. Neither moved, neither spoke, the air between them thick with everything unsaid. A year of silence, a year of separate lives, a year of missing and wondering and growing, stretched into that single moment. Someone else entered behind her, breaking the spell. She stepped fully into the room, her posture straightening, her professional mask sliding into place. She took a seat at the opposite end of the table, not looking at him again, but he felt her presence like a physical warmth in the room. The meeting began, voices overlapping, discussions of load-bearing walls, foundation reinforcements, historical preservation requirements. He heard the words, but they floated past him, meaningless. His entire awareness focused on her, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, the way she nodded thoughtfully at a colleague's point, the way her pencil moved across her notepad, steady and sure. She was here. She was back. And she was carrying a child. His mind raced through possibilities, each one landing with a thud in his chest. He forced himself to breathe in, out, in, out. He focused on the blueprint in front of him, tracing lines with his finger, anything to ground himself in the present moment. When the meeting ended, people gathered their papers and stood stretching, chatting about lunch plans. He remained seated, waiting until the room emptied, until only the two of them remained. She was gathering her things slowly, deliberately, not rushing. He stood and walked toward her, each step measured. Chicago did not work out, he asked, his voice softer than he intended. It did, she replied without looking up. It worked too well. I came back last month. A pause, heavy with everything between them. I am pregnant, she said, finally meeting his eyes, her gaze steady but vulnerable. The words settled in his chest, not as a shock but as a confirmation of something he had already sensed. He did not ask whose child it was, he did not need to. He saw the truth in her eyes, the slight tremor in her hands, the way she held herself, both strong and fragile at once. You were always the only name on my emergency contact list, she added quietly, even when I was being stupid. He almost smiled, almost but not quite. He looked at her, really looked past the professional armor to the woman beneath, tired eyes, shadows of sleepless nights, the faint line between her brows that appeared when she worried. He saw her exhaustion, her fear, her courage, all mixed together. You still drink your tea with too much honey, he asked. A single tear escaped, tracing a path down her cheek. She did not wipe it away. I did not think you would remember. I remember everything, he said, and it was true. He remembered the way she hummed off-key in the shower, the way she always lost one sock from every pair, the way she cried during happy movies, the way she looked at him sometimes like he was the only person in the room. They stood there in the quiet conference room, the old theater holding its breath around them. I should have told you the truth that day, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I had already accepted a job in another city. I was leaving anyway. I thought saying I needed to be grown would hurt you less than saying I was choosing a job over us. He absorbed this not with anger but with understanding, the pieces clicking into place, her distance before the cafe, her hesitation, her careful words. He had carried the weight of her rejection for a year, believing he had loved her wrong, believing he had smothered her with care. You did not have to protect me from the truth, he said gently. I could have handled goodbye. What I could not handle was not knowing why. I know that now, she said. I know so many things now that I did not know then. They walked downstairs together, not touching but close enough to feel each other's presence. The theater lobby stretched before them, grand and worn, beautiful in its decay. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, illuminating dust dancing in the air. This place has good bones, he said, gesturing to the space around them. It just needs someone to believe in it again. She looked at him, then really looked, her eyes searching his face for the man she had left behind, and finding someone new, someone tempered by time and loss and quiet growth. You look different, she said. So do you, he replied, and they both smiled, a small fragile thing but real. They stepped outside into the afternoon light, the city humming around them, cars, buses, people living their lives unaware of the quiet earthquake happening on the theater steps. I live nearby, she said, just a few blocks away. I am still in the same apartment, he answered, the one we painted together. Neither spoke for a moment, the weight of that shared memory hanging between them, not painful but tender, like a scar that has healed but still marks the skin. Would you, he began, then stopped, started again. Would you like to get coffee sometime? Not today, not tomorrow, but sometime when you are ready. She studied his face, weighing his words, measuring their sincerity. I would like that, she said after a long moment, but there is something you should know first, something I need to tell you before we sit down together again. He waited, his heart beating steady and strong. I was wrong, she said, the words simple but carrying the weight of a year of learning. I thought being grown meant doing everything alone. I thought your love was a cage, but it was never a cage, it was a home, and I walked out of it thinking I was brave, but I was just scared of how much I needed someone, scared of how good it felt to be loved well. He listened, not interrupting, not rushing her, letting her words fill the space between them. I spent a year proving I could stand alone, she continued, and I did, but standing alone in a storm is different from standing alone on a sunny day. This pregnancy, this baby, it made me realize I do not want to stand alone anymore. I want to stand beside someone I choose, not because I need them to survive, but because I want to build a life with them. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. She did not. She let his hand cover hers, their fingers intertwining naturally, as if no time had passed, as if a year of silence had never existed. I walked away when you asked me to, he said, because I loved you enough to honor your need even when it broke me. I have spent this year learning to stand on my own 2 feet, not because I wanted to, but because you asked me to, and I discovered I can, but I do not want to do it forever. She squeezed his hand, her eyes glistening with tears. She was not crying from sadness but from relief, the kind that comes when a long-held breath is finally released. We do not have to figure everything out today, she said. No, he agreed, we do not. They stood there on the theater steps, hands joined, the city moving around them, the old building standing solid behind them, a testament to the beauty of restoration, to the truth that some things broken can be made whole again, not by erasing the cracks but by filling them with gold, making them part of the story. Fate had brought them back together, not through grand gestures or dramatic circumstances, but through work, through purpose, through the quiet alignment of 2 lives moving toward the same point. He did not know what would happen next. He did not know if they would build a future together, if he would become a father to her child, if they would learn to love each other again in a new way. But for the first time in a year he felt hope, not the desperate kind that clings, but the quiet kind that settles in the bones, steady and sure. She was back. He was here. And between them something tender and new was beginning to grow, like green shoots pushing through cracked pavement, finding light where none seemed possible. They released hands slowly, both understanding this was not an ending but a beginning, a chance to build something stronger than what they had before, something forged in the fires of loss and loneliness and hard-earned wisdom. See you soon, he said. See you soon, she replied. and for the first time in a long time both believed it would be true.